You know that feeling when you order a pizza on a Friday night? It's almost a ritual. You're hungry, maybe it's been a really long week. You tap the app, and 30 minutes later, this hot cardboard box shows up at your door.
Yeah, it is arguably one of the few universal joys left in the modern world. It's reliable,
Yeah,
it's comforting.
exactly. You flip the lid, the steam hits your face, you grab a greasy slice of pepperoni, and you take a bite. It's simple, it's just dinner.
Right, but, and this is a massive but,
A huge but. Because what if I told you that behind that simple slice of pepperoni is a level of complexity that honestly rivals a military operation?
oh, absolutely.
I've been staring at this stack of documents you sent over for this deep dive, and it's a little intimidating. We aren't just looking at a menu here. We are looking at the internal operations of Tank's Pizza, specifically their facility located at 902 North New Braunfels Avenue in San Antonio.
Yes, and when we say documents, let's be really clear for the listener. We aren't looking at marketing brochures.
Right, not the About Us page.
No, we are looking at their HACCP plans. That stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. We've got their detailed recipe books, their supplier logs, daily checklists. I mean, this is the raw data of how a kitchen actually functions.
It's thick. It reads less like a cookbook and more like, I don't know, a manual for running a nuclear power plant.
It really does.
And looking through this, the mission for our deep dive today is pretty clear. We're going to uncover what we're calling the food safety matrix. Because running a pizza joint isn't just about tossing dough in the air. We are talking about biological warfare against invisible enemies, chemical hazards, and I still can't believe this is a real term I found in the text, food terrorism.
It is a very real term, and it's something every serious food establishment actually has to account for.
Wow.
What these documents show us is the massive gap between cooking dinner at home and operating a commercial kitchen. Like at home, you taste the sauce to see if it needs salt. Here, if you don't follow the protocol, you aren't just making bad food.
You're potentially creating a public health crisis.
Exactly.
So, just to set the tone for everyone listening, I am currently completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of things that can go wrong with a pizza. It's kind of terrifying.
Well, my job today is to walk you through the systems they've built to ensure that, despite those risks, nothing does go wrong. It really is all about control.
Okay, let's unpack this. Section 1 involves what I'm calling the invisible battlefield. I'm scrolling through the biological hazards identified in these documents, and it's a scary lineup. You expect things like salmonella, sure, but there's a whole hit list here.
Yeah, you've got Listeria, monocytogenes, Shigella, parasites like Trichinella and Tachynia.
And something called Bacillus cereus.
Right, Bacillus cereus is a really fascinating one to start with because it challenges our assumptions. We tend to associate food poisoning with undercooked meat or, bad seafood.
Yeah, of course.
But Bacillus cereus is actually often linked to starches,
Yeah.
rice, and in a pizza context, flour. The documents specifically identify it as a potential hazard in their non-animal products section.
That part stopped me in my tracks. I always thought flour was perfectly safe because it's just dry powder. It sits in a sack in the pantry for months. How is flour a biological threat?
Well, it's about what happens after you get it wet. See, the bacteria form spores that are incredibly tough. They can actually survive the cooking process entirely.
Wait, really?
Yeah, so you bake the crust, and you think you've killed everything. But if you let that cooked dough sit out at room temperature for too long, those spores wake up, they hatch, and then they release toxins that are completely heat resistant.
So reheating the pizza wouldn't even fix it.
Exactly. Once the toxin is there, you can't cook it out. That's why the cold chain protocols in these documents are so aggressive. If you look at the section on receiving, it's incredibly specific.
I see it. It says meat must be received frozen or chilled, but dry goods have to be at room temperature.
Right. They are trying to stop that biological clock before it even starts ticking.
And that leads us to the danger zone. I feel like I'm in Top Gun reading this, but I assume we aren't talking about fighter jets here.
No, definitely not. But in the culinary world, the stakes are just as high. Legally and scientifically, the danger zone is the temperature range between 41 degrees Fahrenheit and 135 degrees Fahrenheit.
And bacteria just love that range.
It's their spring break. They multiply exponentially in those temperatures.
So the goal is to keep food out of that sweet spot.
Correct. You either keep it cold, so below 41, or hot, above 135. You spend as little time in the middle as possible.
And this is where the documents get so obsessive. They don't just say, check the temperature. They obsess over the actual tool used to check the temperature. There's a whole SOP, a standard operating procedure, just for calibrating the thermometers.
Because if the tool is wrong, The safety is a lie. Think about it. If your thermometer is reading 5 degrees lower than reality, you might think you're safe when you're actually right in the danger zone.
That makes sense. The documents mandate weekly calibration using two specific methods, the ice point method and the boiling point method. I read the ice point method requires mixing crushed ice and water to get exactly 32 degrees. It feels like a high school chemistry lab.
It's basic physics, but it's the only way to be absolutely sure. Water and ice in equilibrium will always be 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a physical constant. If you skip that step, you have no data. You just have a guess. And in this business, guesses get people sick.
Speaking of getting people sick, we have to talk about the human vector. The documents are pretty blunt about this. They mention fecal-oral route pathogens.
Yeah, it's the unglamorous reality of food safety. They're talking about norovirus and hepatitis A.
The text literally says, infected employees have known sources of viruses. It sounds so robotic, but it's basically saying don't let sick people touch the pizza.
Which is much harder than it sounds. Sick employees are actually the #1 cause of foodborne illness outbreaks in restaurants. People need money, so they come to work with a stomach bug, which is actually norovirus.
So what's the fix?
The control measure listed here isn't a high-tech machine. It's strict hand washing and the explicit exclusion of ill employees. It creates a firewall between a sick worker and your dinner.
They also mention avoiding cross-contamination. I saw notes in the SOPs implying specific utensils for raw food.
Right. Color-coded cutting boards are standard. You never want the knife that cut raw chicken to touch the pepperoni that's going on a finished pizza. It's about creating physical barriers between the biological threats and the finished product.
So that's the biological war, the germs. But then I got to the chemistry section, and I honestly learned something I had no idea about. We need to talk about fries, toast, and acrylamide.
Ah, yes. This is a massive one. Acrylamide is a chemical hazard that occurs when starchy foods like potatoes or bread or pizza dough are cooked at high temperatures.
The documents basically warn that if you fry potatoes too long or too hot, you aren't just burning them, you're actually creating a carcinogen.
Exactly. It forms from a reaction between sugars and an amino acid called asparagine. It's actually part of the Maillard reaction, which is what gives food that delicious brown flavor. But if you push it too far, you get acrylamide.
Tang's Pizza sets a really hard limit here. They say the frying temperature shouldn't exceed 347 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 175 degrees Celsius. And they describe the visual goal, too. They say aim for a light yellow or golden color. They specifically warn against dark brown.
Right. So if you get a burnt fry or a pizza crust that is blackened, it's not just bad cooking. It's technically a chemical hazard violation. They are regulating the color of your food for safety reasons.
That's wild to me. I always just thought burnt toast was gross. I didn't realize it was a chemical hazard. It connects back to the lead and copper warnings in the file, too.
Yeah.
You might have noticed the prohibition on copper utensils with acidic foods.
I did. That is old school chemistry right there. If you put a high acid food like vinegar, tomato sauce, or wine into an unlined copper bowl, the acid dissolves the copper. It leaches it right into the food.
And then you serve heavy metal pizza.
Essentially, yes. It causes immediate heavy metal poisoning, nausea, vomiting. It happens fast. That's why the documents also demand certificates of analysis for lead-free ceramics. It's literal chemistry in the kitchen.
Okay, so we have killer bacteria, carcinogenic fries, and leaching copper. But let's get physical. The physical hazards list in here reads like the contents of a junk drawer. Glass, metal shavings, plastic, human hair, jewelry, buttons, and human nails.
It's gross to think about, but it happens all the time. A false nail pops off. A button comes loose from a chef's coat.
The documents mention a no glass policy in processing areas, which makes sense, but they seem exceptionally strict about it.
That is standard, but vital. Think about the chaos of a commercial kitchen. If a glass jar of olives shatters, you can't just sweep it up. Shards fly everywhere. You usually have to discard all open food in the vicinity just to be safe.
That would be a huge loss.
Massive. That's why they mandate switching to hard, heat-stable plastics like Teflon or nylon instead of brittle ones.
And pests. We can't forget the pests. The documents call pest signs a critical control point.
And look at the defense mechanism for that. It's not just setting traps constantly. It's structural. They require a 6-inch distance between food storage and the floor or walls.
Why exactly 6 inches?
Visibility and cleaning. If a sack of flour is pushed right up against a wall, a mouse can run behind it, nest, and you'd never know. If there's a 6-inch gap of white tile, there's nowhere to hide. You can sweep behind it, and you can see if anything is moving back there.
It removes the shadows.
Exactly.
It's like a perimeter defense.
Yeah.
And speaking of defense, this brings us to the most startling section of the HACCP plan, Section 3. Food terrorism.
This represents a major shift in how the industry thinks. For decades, safety was about accidents, leaving the milk out, not washing hands. That's food safety. But food defense is about malicious intent.
The documents explicitly list intentional ruin of the food by competitors or employees and food fraud.
Right. Food fraud is usually economic. Making the recipe cheaper for economic gain by substituting a cheap ingredient for an expensive one. But intentional ruin is straight-up sabotage.
So how does a pizza place fight terrorism? Because I assume they aren't frisking people at the door.
It's about access control and locked arsenals. The documents mandate that hazardous chemicals, bleach, degreasers, heavy-duty cleaners, they must be kept in locked cabinets. You don't just leave the drain cleaner sitting on the counter.
And surveillance. They require cameras in work areas and restricting access to approved employees only.
It essentially turns the kitchen into a secure facility. They also mention background checks and vetting, plus training to prevent undermotivated workers from sabotaging the product.
Undermotivated workers is a very polite way of saying angry ex-employee.
Precisely. If you have a disgruntled employee who decides to dump a bottle of cleaning fluid into the marinara sauce, that's not an accident. That's an attack. These protocols are designed to stop that before it happens.
It really changes how you look at the employees only sign on the door. It's not just privacy, it's security.
Exactly. It shows safety isn't just accidental.
Okay, let's pivot from the scary stuff to the delicious stuff. Because once the food is safe, it has to be good and consistent.
Correct. Safety leads to consistency. If you're measuring temperature perfectly, you're likely measuring ingredients perfectly too.
I was blown away by the algorithm of the perfect pizza, the precision in this recipe book. We have the personal pizza, which is a 10-inch, that gets exactly 7 ounces of dough, 2 ounces of sauce, and 8 ounces of cheese. But then we have the War Zone.
The War Zone, that is a massive product.
It's a beast, 30 ounces of dough, 8 ounces of sauce, and 24 ounces of cheese.
That is 1.5 pounds of cheese.
It illustrates the need for strict portion control. I mean, think about the economics here. Cheese is usually the most expensive ingredient in a pizza shop. If you just eyeball 24 ounces of cheese, you could easily be off by 5 or 6 ounces.
Right, you throw an extra handful on because it looks good. But if you overportion by 4 ounces on every Warzone pizza and you sell 50 of them a week, over a year, you've given away thousands of dollars of inventory.
Wow.
That is the difference between profit and loss.
It's interesting you mentioned the weight because I also noticed the zoning. They have a My Zone pizza and a Tank Zone pizza. The difference is just the dough weight. My Zone is 7 ounces, Tank Zone is 15 ounces. It's a very clear tier system to show how they tier the products.
And look at the add-ons. It's incredibly precise. It's not just a handful of toppings. If you order a personal pizza with a topping, you get 1 ounce. If you order a large, you get 2 ounces. Even the dessert.
The Zeppos.
Oh, right, the Zeppos.
They get exactly 0.5 ounces of caramel or chocolate sauce. Not a squeeze. Exactly half an ounce.
That precision extends to the workflow, too. You saw the Window Expo checklist?
I did.
The workflow says refill butter, sauce, meatballs.
Yeah.
Ticket time maintained. Clean space between soda dispenser and cut table.
It effectively digitizes the hustle of a kitchen into measurable tasks. In a busy kitchen, it's easy to get lost in the weeds. This checklist forces the staff to reset. It turns chaos into a measurable process. Now, here's where it gets really interesting for the foodies listening. I found a section in the cooking logs that I did not expect to find in a pizza place. Sous vide.
Yes, that stood out to me as well.
For those who don't know, sous vide is a technique where you vacuum seal food and cook it in a water bath at a very precise, usually low temperature for a long time. It's usually something you see in fine dining, not a slice shop.
The charts here talk about cooking poultry or beef at lower temps, like 131 degrees Fahrenheit for up to 7 hours.
Which indicates a level of culinary sophistication well beyond a standard pizza place. But wait, 131 degrees is technically in the danger zone we talked about earlier.
It is, but pasteurization is a function of both time and temperature. If you cook chicken at 165 degrees, bacteria die instantly. But if you hold it at 131 degrees for a long enough time, like those 7+ hours, you achieve the exact same kill rate.
But why go through the trouble?
Texture. Chicken cooked to 165 can get dry. Chicken held at 131 is incredibly tender and juicy. It's a vastly superior product.
But doesn't cooking at low temps in a vacuum bag introduce new risks?
It does. The big one is Clostridium botulinum. It's an anaerobic bacteria, meaning it thrives in oxygen-free environments like a vacuum-sealed bag. and it causes botulism.
That sounds bad.
It's very bad. And it doesn't mind warm water. So if you mess up the sous vide, you are basically building an incubator for botulism.
So how does the plan address it?
Continuous electronic monitoring. The documents say the refrigeration and cooking units for these products must have a system that tracks time and temperature constantly. If the temperature spikes, the risk skyrockets. It's high reward, but it requires serious management.
It's impressive they do that. For the regular stuff, the frying and baking, the logs are simpler. Beef and pork must hit 145 degrees with a 3-minute rest. Ground meat.
165 degrees.
Yeah.
Ground meat is higher risk because the surface bacteria have been ground into the center of the meat.
Yeah.
You have to cook it all the way through to kill the E. coli or salmonella.
Right, whereas a steak only has bacteria on the outside, which the grill kills instantly. So, bringing it all back to the listener, we've gone from bacillus, serious spores, to locked chemical cabinets, to weighing chocolate sauce to the half-ounce.
It really means that the grade A sticker you see in the window isn't just a participation trophy. It represents a massive paper trail. Every time you bite into a slice of pepperoni, there is a history behind it.
Supplier audits, temperature logs.
A food defense plan ensuring nobody tampered with the sauce.
It's an invisible shield of food safety.
Precisely. And the consumer never sees it. You just taste the cheese. But that taste is only possible because someone cared enough to calibrate a thermometer to 32 degrees in a cup of ice water that morning.
It really makes you think about the places that don't do this.
That is the big question. The documents mention food fraud, substituting expensive ingredients for cheap ones. If a restaurant doesn't have a plan this detailed, if they aren't weighing the dough or locking the chemicals, how do you know what you're actually eating?
That is a provocative thought to leave you with. Next time you see a grade A sticker or grab a slice, maybe take a peek at the kitchen and appreciate the massive operation keeping you safe. And if they don't have these systems, you might want to wonder what exactly is in that sauce. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
Stay curious and stay safe out there.